there, it's Gary Parrish. Welcome back to the CBS Sports Eye on College Basketball podcast, where we sometimes discuss camel fighting, dodo birds, and leaky black. Matt Norlander is here with me. And if you're watching on YouTube, please smash the like button. Pretend you're Brandon Davies. Shouts to the BYU legend. If you haven't yet subscribed to the CBS Sports College Basketball YouTube channel, please also do that while you're here. Let's get into it. And I suppose we'll start with the University of Memphis, which has created, by my count, at least 4 headlines in the past week. Number one, 4 assistant coaches, including Rick Stansberry, were fired less than 9 weeks before the start of the season for reasons that have gone to date unexplained. 2, the university acknowledged receiving a letter that it has turned into the NCAA alleging major rules violations by Penny Hardaway and multiple staff members. 3, the school has reportedly reached a deal with Nolan Smith to join Penny's staff. And 4, Penny Hardaway conducted a Q&A with our buddy John Rothstein that was both defensive and at times a little delusional. Norlander, from a distance, tell me what you make of everything you're hearing and reading about Penny Hardaway's program at Memphis.
So much to get into here. GP, great to be back with you. And I know some folks were hoping to get this episode sooner. GP had a little vacation time, so we wanted to allow for him to get back. And so here we are. Thanks for everyone for joining us and listening, et cetera, et cetera. A lot to get into. The fact that we are here again, and by here, GP, I mean talking about the Memphis program under Penny Hardaway in negative terms, connotations, implications. Again, I don't have a full-on timeline for you, but there have been a minimum of a dozen incidents, headlines since he got this job that don't either paint him or his program in a positive light, that are detrimental to the general in charge of running a program, running it competently, and avoiding the negative headlines that can hurt you, obviously, in recruiting, amongst other things there. And the fact that we are getting all of this at once is wild. I was hoping that the negative headlines with Penny Hardaway would be that some idiot tried to steal a bunch of his shoes off his front porch, and it would stop there. But if only we knew just what was waiting here, GP. Obviously, given where you are, I know you've talked about this already today on your show for Grind City Media. I want to get a lot of your reaction, your thoughts on a ton of this stuff. The coaching firings are weird. Stansberry being the most notable one because he was the most senior there. You just don't get, you rarely get one at this time of the calendar. The fact that there was a 4-person purging for reasons that GP just said are heretofore unexplained. Very bizarre and not helpful. Mike Davis, who former, Indiana coach, most notably, but UAB, and then Texas Southern, of course. He's going to be on the staff. I believe Nolan Smith has been rumored to be the next one that could join that staff, and that's all fine and good. You got to get something here pretty quick. I mean, we are in what's considered, generally speaking, the slowest period on the entire calendar for the sport, but all of that stuff, for as bad as that is, or at least concerning as that is, GP, it dims in comparison to, it feels like there's something with this program every other month, and this particular thing you almost never get. You have the school acknowledging, after being approached by media, an anonymous letter that was sent to the school that the school has forwarded to the NCAA. So the school acknowledges it. It doesn't even no comment on it. And frankly, as a media person, give me that every single time. I prefer to have schools acknowledge this kind of stuff instead of no commenting and making reporters FOIA this stuff. But the letter, which you and I have both seen, obviously, and reviewed, which is, again, anonymous and is full of allegations. There's no proof of anything in there. However, what's being alleged in the letter would be significant because, I mean, there's allegations of payments and whatever. With this new era we're in, whatever, we'll see on that. It's the other part of it where there's allegedly, again, this is alleged without a name to it. And so this stuff has to be handled very, very carefully here. The person or people behind the letter are claiming that there was academic fraud within the Memphis program as recently as last season. Now that's the area here where no matter what program you are, if you are involved in academic fraud, you're obviously dealing with eligibility issues in addition to a slew of other issues. That can definitely bring down your program, and is the one area, perhaps the one area more than any other, where if the NCAA can find actual proof, then you can get really, really hammered. I say that knowing just how bizarrely the North Carolina situation played out. This isn't like that. But that now lingering out there as we wait for whatever next steps might come with the NCAA and how soon that might come. We have no idea if we're going to get something in the next week or if we're going to still be sitting here come middle of December, middle of January, GP, waiting on what the fallout is from this anonymous letter and if any of the things that are asserted in it can be vetted and confirmed.
Yeah, it's just super messy once again. And for the most part, or at least a large part of the past 6 years that Penny Hardaway's been in charge, it's just been one messy thing after another. And I know some Memphis fans could take any one of these things and dismiss them, like, who cares? Like 4 assistant coaches were fired in September. Like, who even cares? Okay, but like, can we admit it's not normal? Do you know any other program in America that had 4 assistant coaches fired last week? Like, or will have 4 assistant coaches fired this month at any point? I bet against it. I bet it won't happen again. So this isn't normal. Hey, yeah, I know it's a letter and there's some really, problematic things in there, but it's just an anonymous letter. Who cares? All right. Well, do you know any anonymous letter that's floating around the internet about any other program that's been turned over to the NCAA and distributed to media members? You're right. There's nothing in there that's a smoking gun. I've had that letter for weeks. I read it. I made some phone calls. I'm not saying it can't be documented, proven true, or even that it's not true. It's very detailed. It doesn't strike me as the type of stuff you just make up about somebody or a staff, but there's no proof yet. But still, what I would say to fans trying to disregard it under that umbrella, like, this ain't happening with any other program. It's just yours. And so as I'm sitting here last week, and I am on vacation, I was with the wife and kids in the Bahamas for a few days, and then we came home for a day, and then me and the wife went with some friends to Las Vegas. A little too much, if I'm being honest. And then all this stuff is happening.
The timing of this, by the way, is unbelievable. The fact that this happened when you were on vacation.
And my bosses were and have forever been great about not leaning too hard on me or, asking me to come off vacation and work. Nobody did that. And I both respect that and appreciate it. But I don't know how you feel, but it got to a point where I felt like, God, I've been gone a long time. The biggest headlines connected to the sport right now are connected to my alma mater, the place where I live, a place that I've written and talked about a lot. I should probably say, I got to the point Wednesday night, Thursday morning, where I was home for one day, a half a day, and I just felt like I've got time and I probably should say something. Otherwise, it feels like I'm really sitting this one out when I shouldn't be. And then you go, okay, well, what are you going to say? And then I just poured my truth into a computer. That's all it was. And if I'm being honest, if I could rewrite it, I would write it differently. I wouldn't write it the exact same way, although the sentiment is exactly what I wanted it to be. And I've been critical of Penny Hardaway before and of Memphis basketball before. I can just tell you the fans aren't always on your side. This time they were largely on my side. Like, I got so many texts and messages from, not just Memphis fans, but like prominent Memphis people, the folks who are sitting on the second row, those type of people. And they were like, this is the same thing. I want this to be good. This is what I wanted, but it is becoming exhausting. The thing that I would rewrite differently, and it's one of the things people really grabbed onto, is I wrote, I was wrong. When I was insisting that Memphis should fire Tubby Smith and hire Penny Hardaway, it's pretty clear to me at this point I was wrong. And if I could take that back, I would, because I don't mean it quite like that. And I think you put it even better than I did in a tweet. I believe you called it a good idea. And that's what I think it was. I don't think I was wrong. This isn't Kenny Payne at Louisville. It's not a disaster. It's never been a disaster, but it has not gone smoothly or the way I anticipated or hoped. I won't say I'm wrong to have suggested this. It was a good idea and it got off to a good start. They had attendance problems that needed to be solved. Firing Tubby and hiring Penny solved that, or at least improved it dramatically. They had recruiting problems that needed to be solved. The guy did go out and enroll 2 number 1 ranked recruiting classes. He has not run it into the ground. It's not a disaster. It just has not gone well or smoothly. And that's where we're at right now. And like I wrote in the column, I would never speak for all Memphians or Memphis grads. But, when I talk to them, that whole "in Penny we trust" thing is not quite as prevalent as it used to be. People are now concerned. People are losing hope. And it doesn't mean that it can't be salvaged. And I'm not even ruling out that it will be salvaged, because here's the truth. The guy still will enter this season with an entirely new roster and nearly an entirely new staff, but with the most talented roster in his league by a significant margin. They should still be the favorite to win their mid-major league. But he's been in a mid-major league for 6 years and has never won it yet. So as always, we'll see. But that's sort of the root of the column, why I wrote it, why I said what I said. And then, coincidentally or not, Penny ends up doing a Q&A with John Rothstein, which was
a great get by John. I don't know how many coaches in his spot would have done this. It's wild. I appreciate Penny being willing to do it, but this didn't seem to help matters.
Well, that's why he probably shouldn't have done it. If he couldn't do it better than this, he shouldn't have done it, because it was largely defensive and defiant. And in certain places, and I say this is respect, I'm not here trying to get personal. This is a guy I've known for a long time. And this is a guy who, when I was a teenager, I would cut, as I put in the column, I cut yards by my grandma Jules' house during the summers to save up money so I could maybe, I didn't grow up with Memphis basketball tickets. If I wanted to go, I had to get some money and try to buy a ticket off the street. And I would do that to go see this guy play basketball. That's how awesome he was. So this guy's been a big figure in my life for a long time, but at some point you got to tell the truth. And I don't mean it in any way other than it's just the truth. In some places, the Q&A with John was just delusional. It's like, what are you talking about? And I could take it a lot of different directions. I'll just focus on this specific thing because I think it'll prove the point, and then we can take it where we want to take it. At one point in the column, he's talking to John, and he says, "I'd love for you guys," and because he's talking to John, I assume he means media. I love for you media guys, media people, to put my first 6 years against other people's first 6 years and tell me how it turns out. Well, that's an interesting request because I've already done it. I did it last March. And not that Penny Hardaway needs advice from me, but if he was willing to take it, I would respectfully advise him to never, ever, ever ask people to do that again. Because when they do it, it's not good for you. Quick history lesson. Dana Kirk became the head coach at Memphis State in 1979, 45 years ago, a little more than 45 years ago. And since then, there have been 7 full-time Memphis basketball coaches. In order, they are Dana Kirk, Larry Finch, Tick Price, John Calipari, Josh Pastner, Tubby Smith, and Penny Hardaway. 2 of those 7, Tick and Tubby, were fired after 2 seasons. Tick because of a scandal, Tubby because couldn't recruit at Memphis and couldn't draw people at Memphis. He's an honorable man, excellent coach, bad fit at Memphis, needed
lowest
to go.
Program at its lowest point ever since you've been alive.
Yeah.
With that Tubby stuff,
not even close.
Juxtapose that against here with Penny and it's different issues. It's just why this whole thing's fascinating.
No matter how the Penny thing turned out or turns out, the Tubby thing needed to end. All right. So 2 of the 7 never even made it to year 3, but the other 5 have all completed 6 years, every one of them. And this is just a fact. Penny Hardaway is unequivocally the least accomplished of any of them through 6 years as the head coach at Memphis. I'll run you through some quick things. Dana Kirk, in his first 6 years, made 4 NCAA tournaments and won 11 NCAA tournament games. Went to a Final Four. Yeah, I know it was vacated, but whatever.
They were there.
They were there. Josh Pastner, in his first 6 years, 4 NCAA tournament appearances, 2 wins. Larry Finch, 3 NCAA tournament appearances, 4 wins. John Calipari, 3 NCAA tournament appearances, 4 wins. Penny Hardaway, 2 NCAA appearances, 1 win. So, of the last 5 coaches who have lasted at least 6 years at Memphis, which dates back to 1979, Penny Hardaway has gone to fewer NCAA tournaments in his first 6 years and won fewer NCAA tournament games in his first 6 years. That's not an opinion. That's not analysis. That's just a fact.
More. Yet to win a conference championship.
Hasn't won a conference championship.
Not in the top 6 conference.
Larry Finch in his first 6 years, or let me just start at the beginning. Dana Kirk, first 6 years, 4 NCAA tournaments, 11 NCAA tournament wins, 3 conference championships, 3 conference tournament championships, 4 Sweet 16s, 1 Elite 8, 1 Final Four. Larry Finch, 3 NCAA tournament appearances, would have been 4, but they were ineligible in the year 1. 4 NCAA tournament wins, 1 conference tournament championship, 1 Sweet 16, 1 Elite 8. John Calipari, first 6 years, 3 NCAA tournament appearances, 4 NCAA tournament wins, 2 conference titles, 1 conference tournament title, 1 Sweet 16, 1 Elite 8. Josh Pastner, first 6 years, 4 NCAA tournament appearances, 2 NCAA tournament wins, 2 conference championships, 3 conference tournament titles. And then you have Penny Hardaway, first 6 years, 2 NCAA tournament appearances, 1 NCAA tournament win, 0 conference championships, 1 conference tournament title. Like, the numbers are the numbers. Yes, he has drawn better than his predecessor and then some other Memphis coaches. Yes, he has signed more top-ranked recruiting classes than other Memphis coaches. But in terms of just accomplishments, achievements on the court, what I'm telling you is true. Penny Hardaway is the least accomplished Memphis basketball coach who has gotten at least 6 years in my entire lifetime. And if his name were John Smith or Josh Pastner or even Larry Finch, who was the city's first favorite son, if Penny Hardaway is the second, if his name was anything other than Penny Hardaway, he would no longer be the coach at Memphis. The fact that he is still coaching at Memphis is only because he is so beloved by the community. And everybody wants so badly for this to work that people aren't really screaming that it needs to end now. And I'm not even screaming that it needs to end now. But what I am screaming is that this is not normal. This is not a way to run a high major basketball program, more specifically, a multi-million dollar business. This is not the way to run it. You can't find staffs that have this much staff turnover for no explanation that flourish. You can't find programs that have this type of roster turnover from year 6 to year 7. We ain't talking about Mark Pope inheriting nothing at Kentucky and just needing to put it together, or John Calipari inheriting nothing at Arkansas and just needing to put it together. This guy was the head coach in year 6 and lost basically the whole team heading into year 7, and then fired 4 staff members in September. This is not normal. This is no way you can run a successful program this way. I hope it stabilizes and takes off, but through 6 years, there's really not a lot of evidence to suggest that that's a likely scenario.
And this is obviously all compounded by previous stuff that we're not going to dive back into here because it's middle of September. We don't need to, but just, the Wiseman saga and everything connected to the James Wiseman saga, everything, the COVID stuff, even when it gets to the point where, during press conferences, I have this on as a drop because sometimes we use it playfully, but the fact that at certain points, Penny Hardaway needed to say,
"Stop disrespecting me, bro."
Like, it got to that point during press conference. When it gets to that point.
Okay. Cussing out columnists in public press conferences, cussing out or cussing about other coaches publicly. That was Rick Barnes. The columnist was Jeff Calkins. There's been at least 2. And if we think this anonymous letter launches another NCAA investigation, that's 3.
Yeah.
He's been suspended for more games than he's won in the NCAA tournament. He's been investigated more times than he's won in the NCAA tournament. Like, what? More times than he's won conference championships. Like, this is all kind of bananas. And I one last comparison. Okay. Because if you don't think comparing the Memphis coach to other Memphis coaches is fair, which I don't know why you would think that, but how about this? Let's try something comparable. Alum went back with no college experience to be the head coaches at alma mater. Can we think of somebody like that?
Chris Mullen.
Well, let's just go Juwan Howard recently.
Sure, Howard.
Okay?
Sure. Yeah.
Fab Five, iconic figure, whole deal.
Yeah.
Didn't even make it to year 6.
Yeah.
All right. But you ready for this? Accomplished more in 5 years than Penny Hardaway has accomplished in 6. Juwan went to 2 NCAA tournaments in 5 years, won 5 NCAA tournament games, won 1 conference championship, and was the AP National Coach of the Year in 2021. And still Michigan fired him after 5 years. You want to know why? Because they said, this is crazy. Your handshake line scuffles, altercations with your strength coach. This is just too much. You haven't run it into the ground, but this is not the way you should be conducting yourself. This is not the way a program should be run. We're ready for the calmness that is Dusty May. Think about this. Juwan Howard is a Fab Five member who was fired after 5 years while accomplishing more than Penny Hardaway has accomplished in 6 at Memphis. And Penny Hardaway still is confused about why there's any criticism. Juwan Howard is like, Juwan Howard would kill to be you, to get a 6th year amid all this turmoil. He couldn't get there because administration said enough is enough. Yeah. And I'm not suggesting
he also had a very, very, very nasty public incident that Penny Hardaway has not had, which obviously worked against him.
Of course. I mentioned it, the handshake line, and then there's the but either way, it was like these negative headlines connected to the program. We're tired of them, and it's time to move on. To date, Memphis's administration has been reluctant to do that. And again, I'm still saying be reluctant. Let's see where this thing goes from here. But it just hammers home my point. If he was a different person at a different place, this thing would have been over by now.
Likely true. You mentioned how I said it was a good idea. That comment stemmed around the idea of, or the circumstances at the time where, like the Tubby Smith stuff, he was just the wrong hire, which is unfortunate, but he just was. And Penny Hardaway had been coaching on the grassroots circuit, was obviously extremely connected to his alma mater, extremely connected to that city, and was wanting to get into coaching. There were everything that surrounded the circumstances and lead up to Penny Hardaway getting the head coaching job at the University of Memphis was such a with the exception of Tubby Smith not being good, everything else, it was well-intentioned. There was so much positivity around it. And at the time, it was a very, very good idea. In retrospect, I'm not going to say it was a bad idea, but it wasn't an amazing idea because it hasn't worked out amazing. Now, he is not – every single season he's been there, Memphis has won at least 20 games. And that's still – it doesn't mean what it used to mean 15, 20, 40 years ago. It still does mean something because you have avoided having even one season that was catastrophic. And you know way better than I do, but I know how these things go in a number of cities and towns where the basketball program means the most, means more than the football program or just as much as the football program. And that fan base is simply not going to stand for a 13, 15, 17, 18 win season. Now he's dodged that, but there hasn't been the success in the tournament. Does have an NIT title. How much is that really going to mean for you here? Now, for the AD, he went on. You mentioned Jeff Calkins, your longtime friend, obviously. Here's what Ed Scott said a few days ago. He said, quote, based on every piece of information I have right now today, Penny Hardaway is going to be on that sideline, marching up and down and trying to get us a victory when Missouri comes in here. End quote. He also said on the Calkins show, quote, it's with the NCAA and I'm going to let them do their job as I've done at every stop. This is in regard, obviously, to the letter. After that process works itself out, if there are things we need to do to be held accountable for what we did wrong, we'll stand up and we'll be accountable for it. But there's things we haven't done that we're accused of doing, then I'm going to defend us vigorously. We'll see what comes of it. But the vote of confidence from an AD for your men's basketball coach in the first week of September, just an oddity to say the least. And this could still work out. We're not firing up the pod machine here on a Monday to say Memphis should be getting rid of Penny Hardaway and this has been an absolute disaster. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is you should simply not have a fifth amount of this amount of dysfunction and try and run what has the potential to be a top 25 program in America. And for a variety of reasons, many of which fall on Hardaway's shoulders, whether he wants it or not, they have to end. Someone in the chat earlier mentioned, is Penny Hardaway the Deion Sanders of college basketball? No, he's been way better. Now, there are obviously some parallels there, the battles with the media that we mentioned before and stuff like that, but these are in no way A to A analogs. It's not even close, and Deion Sanders has way, way, way more winning to do before he can even get on Penny Hardaway's level, even with all the disappointment that Penny Hardaway's had. But I understand the pull to maybe want to compare one coach versus the other and how they got their job and where they stand in the sports culture. I get all that, but it is going to be, by nature of all of this and whatever comes with the NCAA case and whatever timeline that's on GP, this now sets this table even more than it would have been if this hadn't happened, where if Memphis doesn't make the tournament, this is a hot seat season for Penny Hardaway. Sure. He's I do not underestimate how much he is beloved in that city. However, we've seen many examples of this, particularly in men's D1 hoops, where that can only take you so far. I mean, to think about Patrick Ewing standing at Georgetown, and now what it is after that is downright depressing. Again, Hardaway's not in. He's not in that bucket. But now you got to win. You got to win big. You got to get into the tournament. You got to win games, and you got to avoid any off-court controversies. You just at a certain point, do you become not worth the headache, right? And a lot of these cases, it's either a fan base, an athletic director, an athletic department, a community where it just gets to be too much. Like, and we are trending and tracking very much toward that ending for Hardaway, but we're not there yet. There are some off ramps here, and there are opportunities upcoming in the season ahead, and it'll start right away. If I don't have the schedule up, but I believe they open up against Missouri the first game of the season.
Yeah, they open with Missouri, and then there's whatever, but then they go to Maui and they open with UConn. So, like, go beat the reigning back-to-back champs in Maui on day one, and we're having a different conversation.
We'll see, but they got to do these things, and if you lose to Missouri and you go 1-2 in Maui, like, things will tend to snowball there. So, it's wild that we are still Parrish. Like, we are still here with this program. And I know Penny, like, I think a lot of his intentions are really, really good, but for whatever reason, the job you take, what comes with the job, it's more than just roster building. I mean, you talk to coaches, there are 7 dozen different things that come with running a Division I program, and particularly running a high-profile D1 program. And obviously, Memphis qualifies as that. And some guys are just better built to handle that than others. It's a fact of life, and you don't really know it until you do it. And Penny Hardaway has failed tremendously on this front time and time again, and now he has run out of slack here when it comes to this. And one more instance of this, or if that turns into a major NCAA investigation, then maybe the end will be near. Not saying it will, but that's obviously a very real possibility. And it's crazy to me that first 2 weeks of September we find ourselves here again.
I see in the chat somebody says Penny was saying compare him to other coaches through 6 years at their schools. He wasn't talking strictly about Memphis coaches. I was only doing Memphis coaches because I think that's a great place to start. I'll do anybody. You ain't going to find many people at programs that believe they hold the place in college basketball that Memphis believes it holds. You ain't going to find many coaches who have lasted 6 years with that resume. Period. You can. Hey, Wikipedia exists for all of you. Go do your homework. Go do it. You won't find many coaches at programs that believe they are a legitimate top 25 program in the sport and have been under the other coaches who would keep a coach through 6 years who has accomplished so little and caused so much turmoil. You just won't find that. And that's the real issue here. It's not that he's run it into the ground winning 5 games like he's Kenny Payne at Louisville. That's not it. The on-the-court product, for the most part, has been solid, if not impressive. The end of last year being the obvious exception to that. But you do wonder if it's just wearing people out. That's just the simplest way I can put it. It's just a lot. None of this is normal. This doesn't go on in other places. And when it does, they make changes. So it is, if there's just one thing I wish Penny would better understand, and I understand it must be complicated for him. I've said this before, but he's been a superstar, universally loved in that city since he's like 16 years old. Mm-hmm. There ain't nobody my age who didn't have a Penny Hardaway jersey or a Penny Hardaway poster or something like that. So to suddenly be dealing with this, people questioning you for the first time, people criticizing you for the first, like, I get it. I would probably be defensive and defiant too, but I wish he would realize it. The problem here ain't the media out to get you. And it certainly ain't the local media out to get you. They've treated you with hand gloves for years. It's that the way you're running your program is not normal. And simply by counterpointing that by saying, I'm not a traditionalist, because that's what he said to Rothstein. Well, I'm not a traditionalist. So stop comparing me to, but like 40 dudes have left your program in the past 6 years. And one of the things he told Rothstein is, but they leave for bigger and better things. No, that's not true. That's just, I don't want to call it a lie, because a lie is when you're not telling the truth. He might believe that. I won't call it a lie. I'll just tell you it's not true. Mike Miller left to go be a high school coach. Sam Mitchell left I don't know what he left to do. The idea that everybody who's left his staff has just gone on to bigger and better things, that's Scott Drew's staff. That's what you say about Scott Drew's staff. It's not what you say about Penny Hardaway's staff. It's been dysfunctional and constantly, evolving. And here's the other bad part. And we don't have to get into this because it's sort of like third hand or whatever. But go talk to anybody who's ever worked in that program in the past 6 years. They don't have great things to say about the stability of it. They all say it's the nicest thing you could say. It's a different deal. So I just wish, I hope that if there's a way to fix it, I hope he finds it and he fixes it. I would love to write that column, but Memphis fans are starting to lose a little faith.
I'll put a bow on it since you mentioned that you're kind of flaring something with me. And ideally, these programs now are tracking to better outcomes here. But 3 schools specifically, you hear about, if not, coaches talk to you about it, coaches that are potentially up to be assistant coaches at those jobs, kind of vet stuff. The whole is everything how's that athletic department running? How's everything running in there? You heard that consistently over the past 6 to 8 years at 3 places: St. John's, Georgetown, and Louisville. And you look at what all those places went through, the turmoil, and the fact that you've got Memphis right there as well. Things have got to change. They've got to change drastically. These hirings that Hardaway's making to his staff, they've got to be impactful, and you got to make a hard pivot now, because if not, there will be a change. And if and when that comes, obviously, if it gets to the point where Penny Hardaway has to either resign under significant pressure or outright be fired, obviously that will be a very, very sad day in Memphis.
Well, it's interesting that you pull those schools out: Georgetown, St. John's,
Louisville, yeah.
Because you know what they all have? There's an obvious thing they all inherit. They all hire alums, to run their programs, and I wonder if it's just,
and that's not, they all did. It's not just necessarily connected to that, but it's more like you're going to look for a job. Hey, what's it like to be at this kind of place? And those 3 schools at the high major level is often got talked about.
Another thing they have in common is it. I think this is probably it becomes harder to undo those things.
Yeah.
Kenny Payne should have been undone after year 1, but they couldn't do it. Patrick probably should have been got earlier than he was, but it's like Patrick Ewing. Chris Mullen, I don't have a great memory of all that, but it probably lasted longer than it should. And again, I'm not even saying, I want to be clear about this, that Penny Hardaway shouldn't still be the coach at Memphis. I'm just saying if he wasn't Penny Hardaway, he wouldn't be. This has lasted longer than it otherwise would last. And I wonder if there's a common denominator there.
Agreed. We got more headlines to touch on. One more big one that happened while GP was on vacation. UConn not going to the Big 12, at least not for now, maybe not forever. It's, I guess, technically on a pause. We'll get to that in just a second, but it's been a minute since we did this live. Nada, I think we need a word from our partners right now. Partners, let's.
You hear that? It's the steady pulse of the world's game that's turning fans into family and sport into passion. You hear that? It's the heartbeat of American soccer. The USL on CBS Sports Network.
All right, Norlander. So the Big 12 and UConn have paused discussions on conference realignment. You had the headline last week. What happened?
All right. Promise not to go as long on UConn-Big 12 as we did on Memphis, which was worthy of every single minute there. But there's some stuff to kind of get into to at least shed a little more light for our listeners as to why this became a story again and why it didn't get momentum and all that stuff. So in the eyes of Brett Yormark, these discussions, and I guess through the eyes of UConn, its athletic director, Dave Benedict, and others, these discussions are now on pause. Whether they can actually ever gain momentum again remains to be seen. Fact of the matter is, Brett Yormark, he's the commissioner. He doesn't get to decide. The presidents actually vote toward these things, and he did not have the votes. According to my sources, there were either 6, if not 7 schools that were outright no's or skeptical at best over this. So Yormark was fighting an uphill battle again. Number of reasons that we got here. One, remember, UConn and Gonzaga, Yormark did this more than a year ago. It was, spring into summer of 23. But those schools never got enough momentum. And then they wind up poaching the 4 Pac-12 when that league fell apart. And then they got those 4 in. And then that was that. And then Yormark still wanted, and then UConn, because it was a non-factor in football, just was not seriously considered to be joining the league at that point. Then Yormark again, last October-ish, I guess it would have been, tried to make the Gonzaga thing happen again, because here's a guy from the Northeast who loves basketball. He sees immense value for basketball moving forward and all that. So then that gets reported that he's trying to make it happen, and then he can't. He doesn't have the votes. That dies on the vine, basically December into early January. And so now Gonzaga, oh, by the way, as an aside from all this, like it's not a candidate at all for the Big 12, and it remains not a candidate to go to the Big East. So its future still remains an intriguing one moving forward. Back to the Big 12. So the presidents, after getting those 4 schools, Colorado, Utah, Arizona State, from the Pac-12, they and really their ADs as well. They wanted to just have 16 like this is a major change in a very dynamic, ever evolving era of college athletics. They just wanted to try and stay at 16 and see what we're going to be in this area of D1 sports over the next 3-4 years, with this house case. I'll get to that in a second. And so there wasn't an appetite to expand. There were definitely some ADs and presidents in the Big 12 who were absolutely in Yormark's corner and be like, let's do this. Absolutely. UConn, you kidding? They got the hoops, men's, women's side. Let's make it happen. But there were too many others that did not want to do it. And because of that, you did also have a feeling that was looming from the Gonzaga stuff that you don't want to have a situation where even if you were to get UConn into your league, and let's say you won 14-2, and you had 2 schools that were like pretty adamantly, or 13-3, and 3 schools that were pretty adamantly against it, and the other ones kind of had to be convinced to be a yes vote. It's just not healthy for a conference or a commissioner, particularly when you're amid new expansion. There's new membership, so they wanted to avoid that. Ultimately, they did. There was also the question of how UConn would get paid. It wouldn't have been a full member. Football would have come in 2031. How is the basketball program going to validate whatever it's going to get paid? How much is it going to get paid? Would it have wound up getting paid as an institution more than what it currently makes in the Big East, where by nature of UConn winning so much in the tournament, it's not just that they make more because of doing that. The Big East structure specifically in its bylaws, UConn makes more, not just every school that makes the Final Four wins the championship. All those schools make more because of NCAA tournament units. The Big East actually rewards UConn and its champions, just like it did with Villanova, even more. Would UConn have actually made more money? And even if it would have, who's paying this out? Because the idea that to pull a phrase from Jim Calhoun, that any Big 12 school would have to give a dime back to pay UConn, that was a non-starter from the get-go. And you had a television partner, Fox, that was adamantly against adding UConn to the Big 12 and effectively losing its most valuable school property in its basketball deal in the Big East. So you were already fighting uphill with that. The idea that you'd make the Big 12 stronger doesn't really make Fox's deal with the Big East even better. So they were fighting that. There was also the overall, the weirdness of this proposal where you're going to take every UConn school program into the Big 12 by what was reported to be 26, but actually would have been 27 at the earliest, barring UConn having to pay a lot of money to get out earlier. But actually the terms of the deal, I was told by multiple sources, was actually 27 because they missed the deadline this time around to do that. But never mind, doesn't matter. It's not on the table. Then you're going to have football come 5 years later, and on the hope that they're going to be not ass. It was just very, very weird. And in addition to what the media landscape would look like at that point. And then lastly, which is a very, very big one, GP, it's the house case uncertainties and how players will be paid with revenue sharing and not knowing what that's going to be. And even that, this is a side topic altogether. We'll save it for when we have more clarity. But last week, the judge in that case, Judge Wilkins, even took, the parties have agreed to a settlement, right? $2.78 billion, but she, it did not sit well with her, the idea that they were going to try and regulate and put a cap limit on NIL payments through collectives. And so they are now going back to the bargaining table. And now they've got 3 weeks to figure out what the house case settlement's going to be, clear this. And so even that happening, obviously a few days removed from UConn not getting into the Big 12, kind of speaks to why there was so much hesitancy with all that, because the house case if you really want to dive deeper into why this didn't really happen right now, the SEC and the Big Ten are expected to, for the most part, because of their media rights deals, be able to, once settled, pay out the anticipated $21, $22, $23 million per year in the years ahead to their student athletes. How that gets paid out remains to be determined, but the schools, for the most part, in those 2 leagues are expected to be able to, quote unquote, afford it. There is concern, I had this from multiple sources inside and outside the Big 12, that pretty much every school in the Big 12 has real concern that they can keep pace in revenue sharing at that level. And if you can't, then obviously there's a major disadvantage when it comes to recruiting and football more than anything else. Ironically enough, for UConn in the Big East, now it needs to determine, whenever we get the house case settled and they realize what they're going to be able to do with revenue sharing, how it's going to handle its football. But the Big East schools with basketball not having football, they're actually probably expected to be in a pretty healthy position from a revenue sharing model standpoint. And whereas some have thought basketball is going to be at a disadvantage there, the Big East is actually one league where it's well positioned moving forward there. So UConn stays in the Big East for now. I'd argue it's better for college basketball to have UConn in the Big East. The Big 12 isn't damaged by not getting UConn. It's still going to probably be the best league in the country, obviously. If you add UConn, you get one more team in there, and maybe eventually they do get in. Maybe they circle back to this, and Yormark gets us over the finish line in 3 years. Who's to say? But huge for the Big East. The Big 12 will be just fine. UConn is keep Dan Hurley, moving forward 5-10 years, if so, continue to thrive, be one of the biggest programs in the sport. Because right now, UConn has the face of the sport in Dan Hurley, and it's the most dominant machine in the sport on the men's side, in addition to obviously the women being the legacy program on that side of it. So that's kind of everything that I can give you on that. I'm not surprised by it. I didn't think, frankly, that it was going to happen. I thought it was a bit of a long shot. Last thing, GP, and then take it away. The one thing I heard from a variety of different sources was it's not helpful to Brett Yormark. Not that Brett Yormark wanted this to get out, but by pure nature of it not being a universally applauded idea, you don't want this much leakage, okay? The fact that so many people knew that they were trying to make this happen and it was so public, it's not that you can't get it done if it becomes public. It can just make it tougher. And when you've got certain schools that are against this idea to begin with, it makes it all the more difficult. And no commissioner wants to have a school so publicly out there only to fail in that objective. And he's technically failed in UConn now twice. So will third time be the charm? Will they even try for a third time? That's where we are. And now UConn, picks up by its bootstraps that little old UConn and goes and tries and win a three-peat in men's basketball this upcoming season.
Counterpoint, if you know you can't get it done privately, do you want it in the public to try to create public pressure to maybe get it done? This happens all the time in all aspects of everything. Like, hey, I don't know if I can get this done. Let me float the balloon out there and see if we can whip up some public support and get things moving. John Calipari famously did this with a practice facility at Kentucky a couple years ago. It ended up backfiring on him.
I was about to say that did not work either.
Yeah, no, but because the football coach turned on him, and then then it just got.
And now they seem to be turning on their football coach.
Right, it's all train's never late. But but the reason, like, I know John well enough to know he didn't just call at the time his beat writer Kyle Tucker to his hotel room in the Bahamas, wherever they were.
Yeah, that's right. Good call. Yeah.
Yeah. And be like, hey, so let's just talk in my hotel room. What do you want to talk about? Like, John did that for a reason. I want you to ask me about practice facilities, and then I'm going to talk to you about practice facilities, and we'll get this out in the public. And then Kentucky fans will jump on Twitter and say, Mitch Barnhart, get this done, except they didn't really do that. And he ended up in a controversy with his football coach. But I want to be clear, not saying Brett Yormark floated this. I'm just saying sometimes when you ain't got the votes privately, your only real option is, well, let me see if I can get some public sentiment on my side. I understand the Big 12 presidents being skeptical for a lot of reasons. I would be less skeptical. I'm not a big believer in looking at something and believing that's just what that is, and there's no way for it to be better. You look at, why does UConn football stink? Well, there's a lot of different reasons, but maybe one of them is that it doesn't have all the advantages that come with being in a Power 4 league. And if you had those advantages, you could be something different. I'm not suggesting it, certainly not insisting it. I'm just saying it's not unimaginable to me that with Big 12 resources, UConn could be a respectable Big 12 program with the right coach in place. And then, with that, you bring one of the biggest men's programs in basketball, one of the biggest women's programs in basketball that has ever existed. And if I were in the room, I think I'd be leaning more towards that direction. I'd be more on the Brett Yormark side of this of, we know what we have in basketball. I think I can sell it separately and make the money right. And I know what we're getting in UConn football, but can we play a role in it becoming not a future league champion, but something respectable that doesn't make us this hesitant about adding them? I would lean that direction, I think. I don't know that this will be looked upon as a mistake, and I agree with you. Having UConn in the Big East just in a vacuum is cool for college basketball. But I think if I'd have been a Big 12 president, I would have been a little more open-minded than what some of them seem to have been about UConn. And to your point about even if you could get it 13-3 or Fort, whatever it was. They couldn't get there. They couldn't even get there. But I'd push back a little bit on if you got three that are absolutely against it, you might not want to do it just because it causes, Greg Sankey didn't care at all, apparently, what Texas A&M thought about adding Texas. Sure. He just said, this is best for our league. We're going to do it. If I'm Brett, I wouldn't be too worried about whether, I'm just making things up, Baylor wants UConn in the Big 12. If I believe UConn belongs in the Big 12, I'm trying to convince the proper number of people I need to convince that of, get the votes and move on. He couldn't do it. Perhaps he'll try again someday, but I see his vision. I'm more open to his vision than some Big 12 presidents seem to be.
Well, yeah, I mean, you just don't want to sow discontentment. And there's also, there's curiosity over whether Brett Yormark will be the commissioner of the Big 12 for 6 years or 16 years. And will he, by adding UConn, I'm just telling you, this is thoughts from some of the Big 12, by adding UConn, is it ultimately a net benefit? And if it's not, is he going to be there when it's realized that it's not? I was also told that, college football obviously runs the day in so many of these meetings. In fact, I had, I'm paraphrasing over multiple conversations with different people here, but when you get in these rooms with these presidents and these ADs and they talk about big picture issues and money and related to the conference, 90% of the conversation is always about things tied to college football. And among many other factors they looked at with UConn and the weirdness that everyone's coming except football team. And in 2031, hopefully they got everything up to speed by then. That was a non-starter for a couple people, but also they're trying to project out what the CFP would look like on a 12-team format, or if they go to 14-team format. And by adding UConn to the league, and even if UConn wasn't the worst team in the league, but let's say on average UConn in a 17-team Big 12 got its act together and was the 13th best team in the league on average, right? How much would adding UConn to would it drag down the metrics? The idea was that it would, and this wasn't the thing that killed it. It was just another thing that worked against it, being the football program. And then, I get why UConn's trying to do this. I'm also told that UConn is not getting serious. When this stuff kind of happens, you kind of look like, okay, is there any? It's like the ACC. Why wouldn't are they looking? I've been told absolutely not. The ACC right now is not peeking eyes up at stores at this point. But UConn wants to better its financial situation so that it can keep. I get why that we're here. But Eamon Brennan wrote a good column about this. I believe it was last week as well. It does suck that what used to be just a non-issue for 99% of college sports fans has now become a predominant thinking point for so many fans in terms of how much money we making. Okay, how much money? The fact that you now have to root for your university to get all this money, even more than wins or just as much as wins. I believe I've heard Dan Wetzel, our buddy, say this as well. The college sports industrial complex convinced fans to care about how much money their universities were making. And it has, in my opinion, not bettered the experience as a college fan. And here, UConn is better served to be a more prominent sports entity by playing in the Big East. I'm not saying it's set up to be absolutely better with its balance book and its ledger. I'm not claiming that. But I'm not totally against the idea that it might not be able to happen if you go all in on basketball. In football, what's the upside there? I mean, I live in the Northeast. The closest program of any kind of relevance is Penn State. This region of the country just does not care about college football.
Boston College is 24th in the AP poll right now.
Yeah, well, and congrats on them for the first time since Matt Ryan was on campus. It might be something there, but the idea that you're going to be able to suddenly build a program into something that can be something that people invest in emotionally, financially, near the level to the basketball programs that obviously run the state. To me, that's too tough of a vision to fulfill. Not to say that it can never happen, but I understand why Big 12 presidents voted against it. And now, again, you go in on what your identity is. It's no coincidence. I'm not saying that UConn couldn't have won back-to-back championships if it was in the American. It's no coincidence that UConn has had a significant renaissance and verified its blue blood status by coming back and joining the fold with Big East schools there. So there's possibly a lesson to be learned there as well. Although I will say, now to bring up the picture, how about the fact that Dan Hurley, massive Bengals fan. Sorry, Dan, your team lost on Sunday. My Bears got that win. He goes to Cincinnati. You see, he goes there. I'm not quite sure what the Bengals, all these teams got these new things now. You go to Kansas City, you bang the drum. You go to Minnesota, you blow the Viking horn. It's got some sort of walking stick there. Listen, I'd love to have Dan Hurley hype up my team no matter what, but he is, despite his Jersey roots, he is a massive Bengals fan, which I ultimately massively respect there. And then they go out and they lose it. They were the biggest favorite on Sunday, and they got rocked by the Patriots.
Yeah, they shouldn't have done that. That was dumb. That was a dumb thing to do.
I mean, maybe Dan Hurley needs to be coaching the Bengals after that. That was wild.
Well,
but,
let's get him an interview at least.
Couldn't help but couldn't help it. How about that? How about Dan Hurley more likely to coach the Bengals or the Lakers? I might take Cincinnati.
What's explain to me the Bronny situation again?
With Cincinnati?
I just probably think Bengals just to avoid the whole thing,
Oh man. How was your before we wrap up here? How was your vacation? I didn't see this. We talked briefly before we got going. Nada mentioned it. And by the way, I have also a podcast. I'm rocking a new backdrop. If you're watching on YouTube, change the office. I'm not doing my HQ setup here, so that we'll do this. It works a little bit better. I'm gonna drop an album behind me here. I got my Pearl Jam record. I'll get to that in just a second. We got some PJ podcast related stuff, but you were swimming with the hogs?
We went swimming with the pigs. Apparently this is something you can do in the Bahamas. I had, through 47 years of life, never heard about this. My wife brought it to her attention because somebody brought it to hers. And so it's a little excursion off of the resort.
Yeah.
You can go swimming with the pigs. Kids wanted to do it. It looks great in the brochures. I said, cool, let's do it. And let me be clear, it was a great experience. Fun, full day, 5 hours out on a boat. You drive out, you get in a boat and you have to go to another little island. And on the way to that island, you pass Oprah Winfrey's house and you pass Michael Jordan's house and you pass Tiger Woods' house and you pass DJ Khaled's house. And so that's, they got a lot of nice houses.
This is all. Yeah,
it's all true. Yeah.
Okay.
And so then you
Oprah
get out
and
there.
DJ Khaled are neighbors.
They could walk to each other's homes.
Okay.
Absolutely. At the very least, jet ski to them back and forth. So do that. And then they call it swimming with the pigs. You don't really swim with the pigs as much as you stand on the beach and you hold food, but not in front of you, out to the side, because wherever you put it, that's where they're coming. And then pigs of various sizes, as big as 400 pounds, as small as little piglets. They just run around the beach looking for food and doo-dooing everywhere. A lot of doo-dooing on the beach. And there's one fella's job is to make sure the pigs don't jump on the little kids or the big adults. And another fella's job is to make sure everybody's got the food. And another fella's job, he just runs around scooping up doo-doo. And I wonder how you get that job, because it doesn't sound like the best one, but it can sure make for some funny pictures. So we got those. We stayed at Atlantis.
Yes.
Battle for Atlantis.
Did you post these pictures on social?
Not yet. I get real stressed out about it. I feel like posting pictures on social is like a chore. And so I haven't done it yet. My plan is to try to get to it at some point this afternoon.
Yeah, I hear you. Okay.
So,
I need a pic. One of these is going.
Okay, I'll send you one. There's one where my whole family is posing, and I'm at the exact same time getting attacked by a 400-pound pig.
That's what I got to say. That's the one. Yep.
Okay, I'll send you that one. We stayed at Atlantis.
Brace the hog. Okay, continue.
Where the Battle for Atlantis is played.
Yeah.
I've obviously seen this place a million times.
You couldn't believe how small it was?
Have you been there?
No, but I've heard stories.
It's incredible.
Okay.
I mean, usually we go places and I go, okay, we've been here. Majorca, Spain. Amazing. I don't know that I'll ever come back, though. I might end up at the Atlantis Resort every year with my kids.
Okay.
I don't think there's a better place to take kids. It is incredible. I mean, obviously you have the ocean there, 70 pools, like legitimate water park, big water slides, rapid river, lazy river, every restaurant you can think of. You want local cuisine? Sure. You just want Shake Shack for lunch? There's Shake Shack. You want a nice dinner? You want Nobu?
Let's go to Bahamas and get some Shake Shack.
I did it twice. There's Nobu over here. You want to do Nobu? We got that. Hey, you like to gamble? Here's the casino and the sports book. Hey, you want to go to the movies? Here's the movie theater. You want to swim with pigs? Do that.
Theater.
Your wife wants to go to the spa?
Movie theater. Yeah.
Movie theater.
But yeah.
Theater. Wife wants to go to the spa. Perfect. It really is like my favorite place I've ever taken my kids. It's great. I don't know why I don't cover that tournament every year.
All right, good deal.
So, and then we went to Vegas after that, and that was a different. That was fun too.
And the black or the red? Vegas.
You ready for this? I just spent 8 nights combined in resorts that have casinos in them.
Don't tell me you didn't gamble once.
I've made a Mets bet. I did not sit
Wow.
down at a single table. Video poker, blackjack, craps, roulette, nothing. I did not sit down even 1 second. Play golf in both places, pool days, shows, beautiful dinners. No gambling. I get bored sitting by myself at a casino, and I would also feel a little like less of a dad if my kids were out, playing in the pool and I was sitting there like, chain smoking and trying to double down.
Smoking.
If I was going to pick up
in your life.
No, I don't smoke, but like you get the point. That's what I picture people doing at a blackjack table, chain smoking and trying to double down. So I would, I don't want to be the,
all right.
I didn't want to be that dad. So
very
it was
nice.
a good trip though. I appreciate everybody holding it down while I was gone.
Yeah, it was good.
It's nice to be back though.
It is nice to be back. I was not off last week, but I did dip down to the Garden to see Pearl Jam. But back in, you got there's a little shot there. I think that's like a second song in the set, maybe. Eddie Vedder with the Walter Payton shirt on there. I'll get that in just a second. But so back in March, you and I did a Selection Sunday episode, as we always do. But because Pearl Jam had a new album come out this year, Dark Matter, and they had a lot of their music that was, used as bumper music on the tournament. They wanted to get some corporate brand synergy going on. So I interviewed Jeff Ament, the bassist for Pearl Jam. That was Selection Sunday night if you're watching on YouTube. That's Jeff checking in. I found out that was at some sort of residence in wherever he was. And so we did it was an awesome episode. So then after that, they were, the management was like, listen, if you wind up going to the show, just let us know. And so I did. I let him know. Paid for a ticket, no freebie here. But seats were good. And this is the 34th year of Pearl Jam's existence together. So for every show this year, Vedder, who is from Chicago, has been rocking a Walter Payton. It's more of a jersey than a jersey, but he's been wearing it every show, and it's been awesome. And so Jared Payton, who is the son of Walter Payton, obviously the late, great Walter Payton, back last weekend, Jared Payton got brought on the stage by Eddie Vedder because Vedder shared this amazing story about meeting Walter Payton and all this good stuff. And I've done media hit. Jared Payton does media in Chicago, so I've actually gone on his show. And I texted with Jared, and I was like, "This is absolutely unbelievable." He had never met him before. He had never met Vedder before. And I said, "This is incredible. I'm going to go to the Garden show, and I'm going to wear the 34. I'm going to wear Walter's jersey." He's like, "You got to do it." So I go. The seats were good, and GP. I did it because I wanted to just wear it because a huge Bears fan, obviously, and Vedder. Not anticipating that Vedder would see it, but I'll be damned, GP. He saw it.
What?
So he saw it. I'll send you. I tweeted out both instances. So during Sonic Reducer in the encore, he catches it like as I was just in his line of sight, and I was probably what would equate to. I was like 6 row off to the side, but it was probably like 15 rows back. It's just like the pit and whatever. And so he catches it and he points at me. And then 2 songs later was Alive. And then right before we got to the jam, he sees me again. He looks at me and he points to his shirt, points to mine, points to his, points to mine. It was phenomenal experience, like super, super, super awesome. Really, really cool stuff there. And then afterward was able to meet up backstage with Jeff Ament, which was awesome. There's me and Jeff. Great dude. Loves his basketball, and I mean loves it. We were talking Cooper Flagg. He was unaware. He's from Montana, has a connection to a lot of the programs in the Pacific Northwest. Like he's all up on his Huskies. Is all too aware. Mike Hopkins, by the way, former Washington coach now with the Suns, has seen Pearl Jam like 15 times on this tour because like he's got the new job now, but he got fired. They paid him a bunch of money. I was talking with him back in the spring, and his wife was like, "You're doing this because you're never going to have the chance to do this again. Go follow them on tour." So Hopkins has been everywhere. And so, yeah, Ament wanted to talk about the Zags a little bit. I let him know about the Steel Venters injury and all that kind of stuff. But he was awesome, and that was not in any way expected. I went to the show, just wanted to go to the show and enjoy myself, but their manager was all too kind, and we got a lot of good responses off when Ament came on the pod back on Selection Sunday. So that was really, really, really cool. And I'm sure you've experienced this probably at FedEx, but it's always interesting. Like we go to these venues to cover basketball games. So like we know where the locker rooms are, we know this hallway, and like we do all this stuff. But I was afforded the opportunity before the show to kind of just go backstage and say, hey, listen, when this is done, come to this room. And then if Jeff's around, he'll come by. And he eventually did. And I met his wife, and she was awesome as well. And I'm like walking, and it's weird to see the garden back there, like set up for a concert. And so like I turn a corner, and it's literally Mike McCready with the guitar on and he's like walking one way, but like we made quick eye. This is probably 30 minutes before they went on. So I assume he was going to wherever they were rehearsing. And it was wild. Really, really cool experience. And Amen being a huge basketball fan was why this even happened. So I was super appreciative of it. And that's why I had to rock the Yield behind me over my shoulder here. Awesome stuff. But GP, I don't know if you've ever seen them, how many times you've seen them. This is my first time seeing them since 2016. They absolutely still have it the whole way. They still put on a great, great, great show. Set list was awesome. And I had a blast.
The first time I ever saw them was, I want to say my freshman year of college, probably fall of 95. Somebody can look this up. It would have been at the old Tulane Stadium in New Orleans, outdoor football stadium. I believe Joey Ramone opened up. Like that's where that one. And then I've seen him more recently.
But it would have been Ted Gormley Stadium.
Yeah, that's
Ted
it.
Gormley, 95 September. Coming up on almost 29 years. I'm going to read you the set list real quick. Animal, the start. Man, oh God. They never play Animal anymore. Animal, Go, Last Exit, Tremor Christ, Even Flow, Corduroy, Elderly Woman, Whipping, Not For You, Why Go, Deep, Jeremy, Dissident, Daughter, Rats, Voodoo Child, Immortality, Rearview Mirror, Alive and Blood. That is, and then that's the main set. Better Man, Sonic Reducer, the Dead Boys cover they played when Vetter spotted me the other night. Rockin' in the Free World, and then Yellow Lead Better. That's an insane set list. By the way, they play Glorified G at the Garden for Howard Stern, who was there and almost never goes out in public, but Howard Stern loves that song and was baiting Vetter to play it. So they finally did. That was an incredible moment. Keep going.
Yeah. I've seen them more recently, like in the past 10 years or so, and they were still great. Like I know you like will still every once in a while spin a Pearl Jam album. I'll just hear the songs when I stumble into them. I'm not listening to a Pearl Jam album probably in the last 10 years, but you're at the concert and you know all those songs. They just come back to you like that. I know every one of them. So no, if they came back through or I was in the same city, I would go again for sure. Like it's a great rock band from our youth.
Gotta try and see him. That was awesome and only made possible because of the pod. So I wanted to share that story there. Good stuff there. Shouts to Pearl Jam. Shouts to Jeff Amen. Shouts to Eddie Vedder, Matt Cameron, Stone Gossard, and Mike McCready. GP, I think that's a show.
Shouts to Devin Downey. Shouts to Chester, South Carolina. Shouts to Terry Teagle, Legend, Huck Larnell. Thank you guys once again for watching and listening to the Ion College Basketball Podcast. If you're not subscribed, please go subscribe anywhere you subscribe to podcasts, including Apple and Spotify. There's more of us than there are of them. That should be reflected in the comments. So please do that, and we'll talk to you.
I forgot. I was going to mention it. We have our bonus. It's right here in my notes. The mystery bonus shoot-around episode. We have a winning bid. That episode will be coming later this week. So keep it tuned for that.
Is it a secret? I don't get to know who it is. I don't know.
You do. You get to know. You always get to know who it is. And I was going to try and not know who it is, but I unintentionally learned who it was. But we did this last year when I didn't know it was Arizona State. That was a lot of fun, but I do know. But we'll have the bonus episode there, so that's coming later this week.
Now? Or no, you can't tell us now.
I want the people to tune in not knowing who it is.
Oh,
yeah. So there we go. So keep that in mind. Bonus episode, Summer Shoot Around, our last one, will be coming at some point later this week. Day to be determined.
All right. So we'll talk to you again in a bit. Till then, take care. Bye-bye.